All Aboard is a pretty interesting episode of Barney and Friends for a few reasons. I'm continuing on my journey to watch the first episode of every season of Barney to see how the show has changed. And in terms of the feel of the show, 7 seasons in, it still feels quite similar. The setup's still the same. We get to see a lot more of the garden here. This is, based on the first episode of the previous seasons. I'm not sure if we saw the caboose in any other episodes, but we do get to see a train caboose, and the set design for it is just really stunning. But we also have a few other firsts. This is Dean Wendt's first time voicing Barney, and honestly, I wouldn't have noticed. I really wouldn't have noticed had I not read that. And it's also Demi Lovato's first appearance as Angela. And I would say that Demi Lovato and Selena Gomez are the two biggest names who have appeared on Barney. I could be overlooking somebody who I just didn't know was on Barney, but certainly I feel like that's quite an important thing for Barney fans and I guess Demi Lovato fans. I was kind of looking forward to this one because the big kid in me loves trains. I mean, the adult in me loves trains as well. And I have to say, it tied together the two main themes really nicely because the train aspect comes about because Cami or Kami, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce her name with my accent, is feeling a little bit sad because she's the smallest, which means she's always at the end of the line. But Barney says, well, so's a caboose, a train's caboose. And it's the most important part of the train, apparently, because that's where the conductor is. And Kami gets to pretend to be a conductor throughout this episode, and there are various different train things. I feel like they could have leaned into the train aspect a little bit more. I would have liked to have seen some crafts and making do's and maybe a few more train-based songs, but I think it still, it worked with the theme relatively well, and it ultimately helps Kami to feel better about herself, and with a fun train theme as well, which worked quite well. We have some songs in this. This is the first episode in quite a while where I actually knew most of the songs. I had started to think they'd just been creating songs for Barney, and now I'm thinking maybe there are just some I wasn't aware of. But we have Pop Goes the Weasel. Didn't know there were so many words to it. When the ants go marching, which is another song that I'd forgotten about completely, and then I started to listen to it, and it all came flooding back to me. Well, I say all of it. Some of it did. It's another one where there are so many words. I didn't know it was such an in-depth song. I've been working on the railroad is another one that I loved, and I thought it was beautifully done. Everybody was really great. The performances were fantastic across the board, and there's a seat in this where it's like a two-person seat, but they're opposite each other, and it spins around. I think they called it the thinking chair or the thinking seat. I have to say, I really want one of those. It looks kind of cool. Most of this was done outdoors, but there were a few scenes inside. But I really liked it. Being a train fan, it's something that appealed to me as an adult. As a child, I would have loved it as well. And that message about being the smallest doesn't mean you're not important, I think is something that particularly little children can benefit from, because, children grow at different rates. Somebody who might end up being quite tall might take a little while to actually get there, and there are those of us like me who just stopped growing at a ridiculously young age and never continued. And the message that you'll not always be at the end of the line isn't true. I had to laugh. Barney told that to Kemi and said, you won't always be at the end of the line. You're still growing. I thought, yeah, try saying that to me 30 years ago because I'm always there. But ultimately, the point is, you may feel like you're the smallest and the last and the least significant, but that's not the case. And a nice message, a fun story. Would have liked to have seen a bit more variety here, but generally it's a pretty good season or season opener, and no real major changes yet in terms of the feel of it. The fashion hasn't really changed, and that's quite unusual actually, because this is approaching the 21st century. In fact, this might have aired in the 21st century, and it doesn't yet quite feel like it's there. So I'm keen to see what it's like going forward, but so far it still feels like Barney and Friends.